to share with you a little story, a little escapade I had. I have a penchant for getting myself into trouble, into predicaments, but somehow God always hears my plea and gets me out. So He must love me. Let me share this little vignette with you. It was 4 o'clock on a crisp, clear, and sunny autumn day in 1984. I was headed home from a local cottage, and the material from the day's classes, because I was in pre-med at the time. Well, I became a nurse, never finished pre-med, but those courses were very heady, very intense, and the material from those courses were reeling in my head. I took physics, organic chemistry, I learned calculations and formulas. I was so stressed out that I decided to stop and ask Daddy for guidance. St. John's Cemetery was along the way, right off of Metropolitan Avenue in Middle Village. Driving through the cemetery grounds, it was so beautiful. It's so relaxing. You know, the tombstones there is so lovely. They're ornate, and there are even angels with outstretched wings. They're stone sculpted, Victorian angels that seem to be guarding the eternally rested. So it just looked heaven-like to me, especially with the sun and the mood of the day. I made my way through the path onto St. John Mausoleum, where my father was. That's another name for the cloister, St. John's Cloister. I parked in the small parking lot near one of the 4 entrances that to the massive stone building. From the untidy appearance of the parking lot, it appeared that construction was going on at the mausoleum. But I didn't see any other cars in the lot. I didn't see people along the way, and I wondered why the cemetery would be so empty at this time of day. But little did I know that that day would soon turn into night. I opened the massive bronze door and entered the marble palace. The marble floor, the walls made entirely of headstone plaques, which were marble, and the high ceiling echoed my small footsteps as I made my way into the elevator. I took the elevator to the 2nd floor. Now, St. John's is a huge building. It has 5 floors of crypts, and each floor is divided into sections. Each section has its own special kind of marble with its own unique color. And that just lends to its beauty. Getting off at the 2nd floor, I struggled to find Daddy's crypt in his alcove. So I would have to go through a maze of aisles before I would find it. It always took at least 2 tries of going the wrong way before I finally got to Daddy's alcove. I tried to use people's names as landmarks along the way, but boy, was I relieved when I finally got there. Noticing the tan and sienna-colored marble with gray and black veins going through it, I knew that that was Daddy's section and that his unit would be right there. Drawing closer to the alcove, I was so happy to find his crypt. Daddy's alcove was a small little alcove. His unit was a small alcove where about 6 other departed rested. And you could see paper vases on the floor beneath them with flowers that are left from those that were left behind to yearn for them. Also, plants and cards are placed there. There's a stained glass window depicting Jesus carrying the cross and Saint Veronica holding the cloth that she wiped the sweat off of his face with. And there's the image of Jesus on the cloth. That's known as the Holy Face. I remember finding comfort in this as he was laid to rest there 10 years earlier. I opened the small brass gate, I turned the knob and felt the coldness of the metal. The air inside the mausoleum was cool and dry, just like the marble. I ran to the headstone crypt and I kissed the marble right next to Daddy's name, where several other lipstick marks have been there that signified other visits. I knelt before him with rosaries in hand, and I started praying. And then my prayers were followed by memories of him. Daddy was an attractive man, tall, and he had the physique of Michelangelo's David. This aspect was an asset to him in his role as police officer in Italy in his younger days. He even graduated and became a detective and went a borghese, which means he went in civilian clothing to become a detective. And Daddy's training as a public protector made him austere in demeanor, hardly yielding, and he hardly showed his softer side, which, well, it made him a little bit less than a nurturing parent. But he was a good provider. Daddy always had 2 jobs. He worked at Breyer's ice cream plant, and then he worked moonlighting as a barber. So he was a good provider, and this fact alone made me glad that he was my father. We didn't know it at the time, but that in itself was an act of love for us. In 1970, when I started junior high school, it was he that marched alongside me towards the school, taking long strides. And we went into the auditorium, and we sat in the small auditorium seats. And a teacher was calling out names with assigned classes. My class wasn't called yet, but Daddy had to leave. So he made sure that I was all right, and then left, and left me with the other children. I was secretly wishing that he could have came with me to school. I was so proud of him, so proud to be with him, that I wished that he could have spent the whole day with me. But now Daddy was in heaven with God, and I was wondering if he and God were watching over my family and me. All of a sudden, I was pulled out of the depths of reverie and into earthly reality. I heard click, 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 and then all of a sudden a shroud of darkness enveloped the place. There was enough light from the mausoleum windows because it was twilight time, so the rays were making their way inside, but it was still dim. And before I had a chance to run to the open staircase, I heard a thunderbolt slam, boom, of a door, the big bronze door. And I screamed out, "Hello, hello, is anybody there?" I knew that I was locked in. The reality of being locked inside the mausoleum hit me with a panic attack. Was I really locked in a mausoleum? Locked in this mausoleum with people that I didn't even know except for Daddy? I couldn't believe it. There was enough light to make my way back into the alcove, into Daddy's alcove. And I stared at the window depicting Saint Veronica and Jesus carrying the cross. And there was still some sun rays making their way through the array of stained glass. And I thought, wow, pretty soon it's going to be dark. So I knelt before Daddy and I said a fervent prayer. I started praying with all my might, asking God and Daddy to help me. Please, I prayed with all my might, promising to be a better person and a good healer once I graduated med school, which never happened because I became a nurse instead. I just couldn't believe it. I was there kneeling and praying and wondering what I was going to do in that mausoleum by myself. I had visions of ghosts coming out to haunt me. And that thought alone terrified me. So I just kept praying to God very fervently and to my Father. And then suddenly a blanket of calmness overcame me. I could feel Daddy's presence. I got up from the marble floor and I ventured about. I started walking through the aisles in the dimness. I noticed names on the headstone plaques that I've never noticed before. There were birth dates with death dates, and some of the burials were so long ago that I wondered how the times might have impacted them. Was it the world wars, cholera, the Spanish flu, tuberculosis, or common workplace accidents that affected them? I don't know. But I walked around and then I started doing the math on the birth dates and the death dates. And I found that some of these people had gone much too early, 18 or maybe 20 years old. And I wondered, what could it be that led to their early demise? Was it car accidents or maybe illnesses that they hadn't found cures for yet? It was sad, but I said a prayer and kept walking. I even passed a famous mobster's crypt, and I said, was it worth it? Now his priorities are all changed. And I thought, you know what? Now all of their priorities have changed. Money, treasure, and power don't mean a thing anymore. It's love, God, and happiness that matters now, being in heaven with God. And here we are side by side, mobster with police officer, poor and rich. And did we take anything with us? No, because we don't need it. We're up there with God now. And I figured, you know what? It was really silly to be afraid of being here locked up with all these dead people. I'm safer in here than I am out there. I have been fooled and ensnared in trouble so many times that I'm safer in here than I am out there with the living, I thought. I kept walking and I came upon a family room. And I was so happy to see a little settee, an end table, and a lit lamp. it's like God answered my prayers, like he presented a place for me to spend the night, because really I didn't know where I was going to sleep. Was it going to be on the cold floors with all the crypts before me? But I found a nice cozy room. It was a family room where people were encrypted one on top of another. Long ago, burials were on the bottom in order, ascending with the newer ones. So I laid down on the settee, which is a small sofa. I was a lot thinner then, so I wouldn't break it. And I put my jacket on top of me to blanket me from the cold air of the mausoleum. My eyes gazed upon the names. You know, it was only one name, a family name, and it sounded Jewish or maybe German. And I wondered, why would Jewish people be buried in a Catholic cemetery, in a cloister? But you know what? St. John's is a magnificent place to be buried. So I closed my eyes to see if sleep was possible, but I kept the lamp on. All of a sudden, I was roused by the curious sound of a door opening, a squeak, squeak. But this time, it was a friendly squeak and a kinder slam that followed afterwards. Click, click, click. I heard light switches, the sound of light switches coming from below the stairwell. Well, I ran to the top of the stairwell and I said, you know, there was lightness, of course, because with the clicks, someone was turning on the lights. And I said, hello, is there anybody down there? This was about 45 minutes later. And I didn't hear any answer, so I waited at the top of the stairs. All of a sudden, a little Italian man, a little silver-haired man, well, he looked Italian, appeared at the bottom of the stairs. He made his way up, and he was laughing. And he said to me, ha ha ha, ma tu che fa? You know, in Sicilian dialect, what are you doing here? And making motions with his hands. I said, you know, I told him the story. I explained the story to him that I probably had come too late, minutes before 4 o'clock, which was closing time, and I was locked in here probably after they checked the mausoleum. And he was just laughing hysterical. And I said, didn't anybody see my car in the parking lot? And he said, no, we didn't notice. Well, he said it in Italian. He couldn't speak English very well. And I noticed that the name on his blue uniform, he still had his uniform on with his name, Salvatore, embroidered on the pocket. And I said, but how did you come here? I thought the cloister's closed. And he said, oh no. He said, stavo travagliando e lasciavo le ferre, non venivo rinda, abito qua vicino a due passi. And I came back to get my ferre because mi scandavo se la rubavano. He was afraid that his tools would get stolen over the weekend. It was a Friday. So he said that he lived right there in Middle Village, not far, and he remembered that he had left his tools, le ferre, and he came back to get them. So I said, oh my God, and I hugged him and I just kept kissing him like more than once on both sides of the face, and he just kept laughing, going like this, Mizzica, buttiglielo diavolo. He just couldn't believe it. And I felt embarrassed, you know. I was annoyed that they didn't see my car in the lot, but also I was embarrassed that what I had done, having had a Lucy Ricardo moment, and I thought to myself, boy, I do really well getting myself into pickles without Ethel. Anyway, you know, I was just so grateful, and I thought about, you know, having prayed and everything, and I said, you know, Lord, did you send Salvatore to help me? Did you hear my prayer? I think that God wanted to see if I would seek his help. And he did. He answered my prayer. But you know what? Even if God didn't send Salvatore to rescue me, I think that he would make me bear the night out in the mausoleum without being frightened or terrified and having to go to Bellevue the next day. He would have kept me calm and safe anyway, because I asked him to. So driving home, I was thinking to myself, boy, prayer really works. You know, where would I be without my faith? My faith is the most important thing that I own. And I was thinking, I'm so happy that I'm faithful and that I love God and that he answers me. And so driving home, I was thinking about my family. They're a little bit dysfunctional. And I said, I could just imagine what they would say if I explained the story to them. I imagined my sister's response. Oh, she would do something like that. And my brother, oh, she's too crazy. My mother has always said that I'm a little bit of a scatterbrain, and I could just hear her saying, "Ma chi ha la testa nell'aria?" You have an airhead. She always says my head is in the air. So for fear of being ridiculed, I didn't utter a word of this story to anybody. Only God, Saint Veronica, Daddy, Salvatore, and me know what happened on that crisp, clear autumn day in 1984. And I will take it to my crypt at the Virgin Mary Mausoleum at St. Charles Cemetery, overlooking the Holy Innocents in Farmingdale, Long Island. The Holy Innocents are, well, some of the children there, you know, and since I'm a pediatric nurse, I wanted that spot. And because it overlooks the children, being a pediatric nurse. And some special children that I took care of are there because unfortunately I worked with terminally ill children. And I want to be there and guard them and be around them and their spirit, even though they're around me anyway, you know. So I feel their presence, and sometimes I appeal to them also for help as little angels. So you see, my faith gets me through everything. I get myself into pickles, but somehow God always gets me out. He must love me. I don't know. Thank you, God. Thank you for listening to my little story.